The shrill wail of police sirens pierced the peaceful Saturday afternoon on Maple Street. Three patrol cars screeched to a halt in front of David Miller's modest rancher, lights flashing in a chaotic dance of red and blue. From across the street, Karen Wilkinson watched with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, a self-satisfied smirk playing on her thin lips. The neighbors emerged from their homes, curious and concerned, as four officers approached David's front door, with hands hovering near their holsters. "That's him, officers. That's the man who destroyed community property." Karen's voice carried across the lawn, pitched to ensure everyone heard. "I have the photographic evidence right here on my phone." David, a widower in his early 50s with kind eyes and perpetual stubble, opened his door looking bewildered. The officer's stance relaxed slightly when they saw the mild-mannered man in a faded Eagles t-shirt and garden-stained jeans. "Sir, we received a call about destruction of property," the lead officer stated firmly. "Mind explaining what happened to the swimming pool that was reportedly here yesterday?" David blinked, then understanding dawned on his face. He gestured to his backyard. "You mean my inflatable kiddie pool? The one I bought for my grandkids to use last weekend?" The officers exchanged glances as Karen marched across the street, her designer sandals slapping against the asphalt with military precision. At 56, Karen Wilkinson was the self-appointed guardian of Sunset Hills Estate's property values and aesthetic standards. Her highlighted blonde bob never moved even in strong winds, and her pastel cardigans concealed the iron will of a dictator. "Not just any pool." Karen thrust her phone at the officers. "An unauthorized aquatic installation that violates Iowa Bylaw 17, Section B, Paragraph 4. It devalues our entire community." On her phone screen was a photo of a modest blue inflatable pool, perhaps 4 feet in diameter, that had sat in David's fenced backyard. The lead officer, Officer Rodriguez, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, did you enter his property to take this picture?" Karen's righteousness faltered momentarily. "I was documenting a violation. As HOA president, it's my responsibility to." "From over his fence?" Officer Rodriguez asked. David sighed. "Karen, it was just a temporary pool for my grandkids. I deflated it and put it away in the garage Sunday evening like I always do." Without proper approval, Karen's voice rose an octave. "All exterior changes require written authorization with 3 board signatures. The bylaws clearly state." "Ma'am," Officer Rodriguez interrupted, "there's no crime here. A temporary kiddie pool doesn't qualify as a permanent structure or property modification." Karen's face flushed crimson. "But the rules don't justify calling emergency services for non-emergencies," he finished firmly. "This is a civil matter at best, and honestly, not even that." The neighbors watching from their lawns began to murmur and share knowing looks. This wasn't Karen's first crusade, but it was perhaps her most dramatically unsuccessful one. Karen's eyes narrowed as she scanned the growing crowd of neighbors. She recognized the expressions on their faces: amusement, exasperation, judgment. These people should have been grateful for her vigilance. Instead, they were staring at her like she was the problem. "Fine," she snapped, straightening her cardigan. "But the board will be discussing this at our next meeting. David, expect a formal citation." As she marched back to her immaculately maintained colonial, with its perfectly symmetrical boxwoods, Karen was already composing the sternly worded email she would send to all residents. Someone had to maintain standards in this neighborhood, even if no one appreciated her efforts. Behind her, she heard laughter. They would see. They would all see eventually that she was right. The emergency OA meeting called by Karen Wilkinson was held in the Sunset Hills Community Center on Tuesday evening. The turnout was unprecedented. Nearly every household was represented, filling the room with a buzz of anticipation. Karen had spent hours preparing her presentation, complete with a PowerPoint featuring color-coded graphs showing the correlation between visible recreational equipment and property devaluation. "As you can see from these projections," Karen pointed to a sharply declining red line, "if we allow exceptions to our exterior standards, we risk an 8.7% decrease in home values over just 18 months. From the back row, Sophia Lee, a new resident and environmental lawyer, raised her hand. "Excuse me, but what's the source of this data?" Karen blinked. "I compiled it myself based on real estate trends." "From where exactly?" Sophia persisted. "Which market analysis or economic study?" The room grew quiet as Karen shuffled her notes. "Various sources. The point is, David Miller interrupted gently, that we're here because you called armed police officers to my home over an inflatable pool that wasn't even visible from the street." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Karen felt her control slipping. "This isn't just about one pool," she insisted, her voice rising. "It's about precedent. Today it's inflatable pools, tomorrow it's flamingo lawn ornaments and cars on blocks." Marcus Johnson, who'd lived in the neighborhood even longer than Karen, stood up. Karen, I've been meaning to ask, did you get board approval for the new wind chimes on your back patio? I believe wind instruments are addressed in Bylaw 23, Section C. Karen's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. The wind chimes had been a birthday gift from her sister. They were tasteful Woodstock chimes, not some gaudy tourist trinket. That's completely different, she managed finally. Is it? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Or are some rules only for other people? The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen felt trapped, her carefully constructed authority crumbling around her. She straightened her spine and tried to regain control. We're getting off topic. I move that we implement a new approval process for all temporary outdoor installations, with mandatory 72-hour notice and a $50 processing fee. The collective groan that filled the room was unmistakable. Ward Treasurer Helen Chen shook her head. Karen, we're volunteers managing a neighborhood, not a corporation. We don't have the bandwidth to process applications for kiddie pools and slip and slides. Then we hire an administrator, Karen countered. We could increase dues by 15% to cover. The chorus of no was immediate and emphatic. For the first time in 7 years as AOA president, Karen faced open rebellion. As she looked around the room, she realized that the carefully cultivated respect she thought she'd earned was actually just tolerance, now wearing dangerously thin. Fine, she snapped, gathering her materials. If no one cares about protecting our investments, I can't force you. But when this neighborhood goes downhill, don't come crying to me. As the meeting adjourned, Karen overheard Sophia talking to David and several others. Neighborhood potluck this Saturday. Everyone's welcome. Just bring whatever you want to share. A social gathering no one had told her about. Karen felt a strange, hollow feeling in her chest. She'd lived here for 15 years. She was the president of the HOA. How had she not been informed? As she walked to her car alone, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in her carefully ordered world, and she didn't know how to shift it back. 3 weeks after the pool incident, Karen Wilkinson sat alone at her kitchen island, systematically highlighting violations in the monthly HOA newsletter she just finished composing. Her coffee had gone cold, but she barely noticed, absorbed in her meticulous documentation of community infractions. Unapproved bird feeder at 742 Oakwood Lane. Holiday lights still visible in windows at 615 and 617 Cherry Street in April. Unauthorized vegetable garden encroaching on common area sightlines at 823 Maple. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Karen clicked on it immediately, expecting a response to one of her many enforcement notices. Instead, it was a neighborhood-wide message from David Miller. Sunset Hills Community Update. Board elections next month. After thoughtful consideration, I've decided to run for HOA president with a platform focused on building community while maintaining our neighborhood's character. I believe we can have both property value protection and neighborly flexibility. Join me this Sunday for an informal meet and greet picnic at the park to discuss your vision for our neighborhood. Karen nearly choked on her coffee. David Miller? Running against her? After 15 years of her dedicated service, the betrayal stung sharply, but even worse was the rapidly accumulating list of responses. Count us in. Finally, a positive approach. Looking forward to it. So refreshing to see new energy. 27 enthusiastic responses in just 8 minutes, and not a single neighbor had bothered to reply to her detailed newsletter about critical violations. Karen's hands trembled as she set down her phone. This wasn't right. She had sacrificed countless hours keeping this neighborhood from descending into chaos. She had personally prevented at least 14 unapproved fence installations and 9 non-regulation mailboxes. She had maintained property values through the 2008 housing crash and the pandemic. And this was her thanks. Being replaced by a man who couldn't even follow simple rules about temporary aquatic installations. Karen grabbed her cardigan and her official AOA business clipboard and strode out her front door. She needed evidence of David's unsuitability for leadership, and she knew exactly where to look. 2 hours later, Karen had circumnavigated the entire neighborhood, documenting every possible violation with her phone camera. David Miller's property yielded little, just some marginally overgrown hostas, but Karen had gathered ammunition from elsewhere. The Paddles garbage can was visible from the street. The Hendersons had wind chimes similar to hers. The Gonzalezes had planted non-approved perennials. As she approached Sophia Lee's modern craftsman home, Karen spotted something that made her stop short. There in Sophia's backyard, clearly visible through the decorative iron fence, was an unauthorized raised garden bed, at least 3 inches taller than regulations permitted. Karen quickly snapped several photos, zooming in for detail. As she did, she noticed Sophia and David on the back deck, deep in conversation. They hadn't seen her yet. Think we can make real positive changes, David was saying. Most people are on board. It's time, Sophia agreed. Karen means well, but her approach is driving people away instead of bringing them together. Karen froze, finger still on her phone's camera button. Means well, like she was some misguided child and not the woman who had single-handedly preserved their community standards. I've lived here 3 months and gotten 7 violation notices, Sophia continued with a laugh. My favorite was for the wind chimes that exceed the permitted decibel level. David chuckled. She actually measured the decibels. Apparently, with an app on her phone at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, their laughter felt like physical blows. Karen stepped back, unaware of the decorative rock garden border behind her. She stumbled, lost her balance, and fell backward with a startled cry directly into Sophia's meticulously maintained hydrangeas. David and Sophia rushed to the fence as Karen scrambled to her feet, her beige cardigan now stained with dirt and mulch. Karen, are you okay? Sophia called, genuine concern in her voice. But Karen could only see their prior laughter, their conspiracy, their disrespect. This is private property, she sputtered, brushing ineffectually at her clothes. You have no right to discuss me or my leadership. Karen, we were just, David began. Plotting. Undermining 15 years of my work? Karen's voice rose to a pitch that made a nearby dog start barking. Well, congratulations on your little coup, David. I hope you enjoy watching everything I've built fall apart. As she stormed away, Karen didn't see the concerned glances exchanged between David and Sophia. She didn't hear David's quiet, "This is worse than I thought." All she could hear was the blood pounding in her ears and the certainty that she was being betrayed by the very community she had sacrificed so much to protect. The electronic thermostat in Karen's immaculate living room showed 5:47 a.m. when she finished her final review of the comprehensive documentation of Sunset Hills Homeowners Association violations, a 15-year analysis. The 47-page report, bound in a professional portfolio with color-coded tabs and an executive summary, represented 3 sleepless nights of obsessive work. Every violation she ever documented, cross-referenced by property, owner, and severity, every exemption request denied or granted, every property value increase she could reasonably attribute to her vigilance. The document was her legacy, her vindication, and, as she saw it, her weapon. Karen had decided that if David Miller wanted her job, he would inherit the full weight of its responsibilities. No more selective enforcement, no more community over compliance nonsense. Every single violation would need to be addressed, or she would take legal action against the HOA itself. At precisely 9 o'clock a.m., Karen arrived at the offices of Greenfield & Associates, the property management company that handled Sunset Hills administrative matters. She dropped her portfolio on the receptionist's desk with a satisfying thud. I need this scanned and emailed to every homeowner in Sunset Hills by noon today, she announced. It contains critical information about ongoing violations that require immediate attention. The receptionist, a young woman named Amber, whom Karen had always found insufficiently deferential, glanced at the thick binder. Ms. Wilkinson, I'll need authorization from the board to send a mass communication, especially one this substantial. Karen's smile was tight. I am the board president, Amber. That is my authorization. Yes, but policy requires prompt attention to HOA matters, Karen interrupted. This is an urgent issue affecting property values. Amber looked uncomfortable. Let me check with Mr. Greenfield. While Amber disappeared into a back office, Karen noticed a calendar on the reception desk. There, marked for the following Tuesday, was a meeting entry. Sunset Hills Board/Legal Special Session. Bylaw Revision Committee. Karen stared at it, blood rushing to her face. A bylaw revision committee? That she, the president, knew nothing about. When Amber returned with Mr. Greenfield, Karen was already gathering her portfolio. Ms. Wilkinson, the property manager began, I understand you have some concerns. What I have, Karen cut him off, is evidence of a conspiracy to undermine the legal governance of Sunset Hills Estates. When were you planning to inform me about this bylaw revision committee? Mr. Greenfield's professional demeanor faltered slightly. I believe the board vice president was supposed to discuss that with you. Marcus Johnson? Karen's laugh was bitter. The same Marcus Johnson who criticized my wind chimes? How convenient. She tucked the portfolio under her arm. Never mind. I'll handle this myself. Karen's next stop was the county clerk's office, where she filed a formal complaint against the HOA board for procedural violations. Then she visited a printing shop where she ordered 200 copies of a condensed version of her report, with particularly egregious violations highlighted and property addresses clearly visible. By evening, Karen had personally delivered these reports to every home in Sunset Hills, along with a cover letter explaining that she was being forced out by a cabal of rule breakers who wanted to destroy neighborhood standards. At David Miller's house, she lingered a moment longer, making sure the package was perfectly centered on his welcome mat. As she straightened up, she noticed movement behind the blinds. David had seen her. Karen didn't care. Let him see. Let them all see what happened when they tried to replace someone who had given everything to this community. Back home, Karen checked her email and found it flooded with responses, but not the supportive outrage she had expected. Instead, neighbors were expressing shock, dismay, and anger at having their addresses and alleged violations publicly distributed. The most troubling email came from Sophia Lee. Karen, as an attorney, I feel obligated to inform you that publishing private homeowner information and alleged violations without board approval potentially violates several privacy statutes. Additionally, entering private property to document supposed violations without permission could constitute trespassing. I strongly suggest you retract your distributed materials immediately. Karen stared at the screen, her certainty wavering for the first time. Was Sophia threatening legal action against her? Could she really be liable for simply doing her job? As the enormity of what she'd done began to sink in, Karen's phone rang. It was Marcus Johnson. Karen, he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle, we need to talk. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow night. I'm asking you as someone who's known you for 15 years. Please come and let's discuss this rationally before things go any further. After hanging up, Karen sat motionless at her kitchen island surrounded by EHOA documents and violation notices. For the first time since becoming board president, she felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. The community center hummed with tense energy as Karen approached the entrance. Through the windows, she could see the room was packed, even more residents than had attended the pool incident meeting. Her hand hesitated on the door handle as she glimpsed familiar faces, many wearing expressions of concern or outright anger. Taking a deep breath, Karen squared her shoulders and pushed through the door. The conversation died immediately, all eyes turning toward her. She had expected this, had even rehearsed how she would walk confidently to her usual seat at the center of the board table, maintaining her dignity despite their betrayal. What she hadn't expected was to find someone already sitting in her chair. Marcus Johnson gave her an apologetic look from his vice president's seat. Karen, thank you for coming. We've had to make some temporary adjustments to the board structure in light of recent events. In her chair sat Patricia Davidson, a retired judge who had always politely declined Karen's previous invitations to join the HOO board. Patricia nodded professionally at Karen. What is the meaning of this? Karen demanded, her voice thin in the silent room. I am the elected president of this board. Karen, Marcus explained gently, after yesterday's distribution of private information and the formal complaint you filed against the board, without discussing it with any of us first, we invoked the emergency succession clause in the bylaws. Judge Davidson has agreed to serve as interim president until we can resolve this situation. Karen felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. You can't do that. There has to be a vote. There was, Marcus replied. At emergency board session last night, it was unanimous. Karen looked around the table at the other board members, people she had worked alongside for years. None would meet her eyes except Helen Chen, the treasurer, who simply looked sad. Please take a seat, Karen, Patricia gestured to an empty chair in the front row. You're still a homeowner and have every right to be part of this meeting. The humiliation burned through Karen like acid. Stood in the audience, like any ordinary resident, she remained frozen until David Miller quietly stood and offered her his chair, moving to stand against the wall. Karen sank into the seat, her mind racing for some procedural objection, some bylaw that would restore her authority. But she knew the emergency succession clause existed. She had insisted on adding it herself years ago, never imagining it would be used against her. Patricia called the meeting to order with a calm authority that made Karen's chest tighten with resentment. We're here to address recent events and find a constructive path forward, the judge began. First, I want to clarify that the board has recalled all copies of the unauthorized violation report distributed yesterday. If you received one, please return it for secure disposal. It wasn't unauthorized, Karen interjected. As president, I have full authority to. Ms. Wilkinson, Patricia interrupted firmly, you'll have your opportunity to speak. For now, I must inform everyone that the board has received notice from 3 homeowners of potential legal action against the HOA for privacy violations related to that report. A murmur ran through the room. Karen's face burned. Additionally, Patricia continued, the property management company has expressed concerns about hostile communications and procedural violations. This is absurd, Karen stood up, unable to contain herself. Everything I've done has been to protect this community. I've given 15 years to maintaining our standards while you all look the other way on violations that threaten our property values. The room fell silent again. Karen realized she was shaking. Karen, David's voice was surprisingly gentle as he stepped forward. No one doubts your dedication, but somewhere along the way, rules became more important to you than neighbors. The rules are what make us neighbors instead of strangers, Karen shot back. Without standards, without order, what do we even have? Sophia Lee spoke up from her seat. Maybe we have people who help each other, who care about more than whether a garden bed is 3 inches too tall. Says the woman with 7 violations in 3 months, Karen retorted. Yes, Sophia acknowledged calmly. 7 notices about things that don't affect anyone else's life or property, but somehow warranted you measuring the decibel level of my wind chimes at dawn. Scattered laughter rippled through the room, and Karen felt her last thread of control slipping away. You think this is funny? You think property values are a joke? Her voice rose. I protected this neighborhood from exactly the kind of decline that happens when people stop caring about standards. And this is the thanks I get. The room grew uncomfortable. Karen looked from face to face, searching for any ally, any sign of understanding. Finding none, something inside her finally cracked. Fine, she whispered, her voice suddenly small. Fine. You want to ruin everything we've built? Go ahead. I'm done trying to save you from yourselves. As she turned to leave, Marcus Johnson's voice stopped her. Karen, wait. Nobody wants you to leave. We just need to find a better balance. Karen paused at the door, not turning around. There is no balance, Marcus. There's either order or chaos, and you've chosen chaos. With that, she walked out, the door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow felt more final than any slam could have. For 2 weeks, Karen Wilkinson became a ghost in her own neighborhood. She left her house only for essentials, ignored waves from neighbors, and kept her blinds drawn. Her yard, once the model of HOA compliance, began to show subtle signs of neglect: unswept walkways, mail lingering in the box, a newspaper that sat on the driveway for 3 days. Inside, Karen moved through her immaculate home like a stranger. Without the constant demands of HOA business, her days stretched empty before her. She found herself staring at the violation documentation filing cabinet, 15 years of meticulous record-keeping, and wondering what it had really accomplished. On the 16th day of her self-imposed exile, Karen's doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she was surprised to see Helen Chen, the HOA treasurer and the only board member who had seemed sympathetic at that final meeting. Karen almost didn't answer, but something in Helen's patient posture made her relent. The board didn't send me, Helen said before Karen could speak. I came because I miss our Thursday coffee. For 7 years, Helen had been the only board member who willingly joined Karen for their weekly financial review sessions. Karen had always considered it purely business, but Helen's words made her realize these meetings had been the closest thing she had to a friendship. I doubt there's anything to discuss now, Karen replied stiffly. Maybe not HOA business, Helen agreed, but I thought you might want to know what's happening. Against her better judgment, Karen let Helen in. Over reluctantly offered tea, Helen shared the community updates. David had been officially elected president. The bylaw revision committee was proposing changes to streamline processes. A community garden was being planned for the vacant lot at the end of Maple Street. And what about property values? Karen couldn't help asking, a touch of bitterness in her voice. Had they plummeted yet with all these improvements? Helen smiled gently. Actually, 2 homes sold last week above asking price. The Johnsons got 3 offers their first day on the market. Karen absorbed this information silently. Karen, Helen said carefully, no one denies that your dedication helped maintain our neighborhood. But rules without relationships became difficult for people. I was just doing my job, Karen murmured. I know, but somewhere along the way it seemed like you forgot we're all just people living our lives, not properties to be managed. After Helen left, Karen stood in her kitchen, unsure what to do with herself. On impulse, she put on her walking shoes and ventured outside for the first time in daylight hours since the meeting. The neighborhood looked the same. Not the descent into chaos she had imagined. Children played in yards, gardens bloomed. And yes, there were some changes. The Paddles had installed a small fountain that probably hadn't gone through proper channels, and the Hendersons had painted their front door a shade of blue that wasn't on the approved color palette. But the world hadn't ended. As Karen rounded the corner toward the park, she saw a group gathered at the vacant lot, the Community Garden Planning Committee, already marking out plots with stakes and string. David Miller was there, alongside Sophia Lee and several other neighbors. Karen almost turned back, but David spotted her and waved. After a moment's hesitation, she approached, maintaining a careful distance. Karen, David seemed genuinely pleased. It's good to see you out and about. I just wanted some air, she said stiffly. Well, since you're here, David gestured to the marked plots, we could actually use your input. You know more about the drainage issues in this area than anyone else. Karen blinked in surprise. You want my opinion? Of course, David nodded. No one's ever questioned your knowledge or commitment, Karen. Just, perhaps your method of delivery sometimes. A laugh escaped from Sophia, who quickly covered it with a cough. Sorry, but he's right, you know. Rules and structure are important, They just need to serve the community, not the other way around. Karen looked at the others, expecting to see mockery, but found only cautious openness. Something tight in her chest began to loosen, just slightly. The southwest corner floods in heavy rain, she said finally. You'll want to put in a French drain along that edge before planting anything. See, David smiled at the others. That's exactly the kind of institutional knowledge we need. As the group discussed drainage solutions, Karen found herself reluctantly drawn into the conversation. When they invited her to join them for lunch afterward at the picnic tables, she surprised herself by